Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump accusing Xi, Putin and Kim of conspiring against the U.S. That's as Trump welcomes the Polish president to the White House amid further Russia-Ukraine negotiations. Mario Tsu has the details. France announces that European allies have successfully finalized a plan for security guarantees for Ukraine. Arian Pozdar has more on that. And on a group of Western allies set to meet in Paris tomorrow. In a hearing about the space race, Senate lawmakers and experts emphasize that it's critical for the U.S. to stay ahead of China. Jason Blair brings us the highlights. Victims of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein tell their stories on Capitol Hill. They want lawmakers to push the Justice Department to release more files. Luis Eduardo Martinez has more on that, plus a bill that would ban members of Congress from trading stocks and the looming budget funding deadline. Florida Surgeon General announces that he's working to end all vaccine mandates in the state. How officials inside and outside Florida are reacting.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. The latest on President Trump's negotiations on the Russia-Ukraine war, and Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin caught on a hot mic talking about reaching immortality through organ transplants. That's as China's communist regime seeks to flex its military might. NTD's Mario Tsu has more from the White House.
We've taken very strong action, but I'll be speaking to him over the next few days.
President Trump saying he'll be speaking to Russia's Vladimir Putin over the next few days, warning Russia of more actions if Putin doesn't cooperate in negotiations.
I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see things happen.
Welcoming the Polish president to the White House with a flyover tribute. President Trump assures that American troops will stay in Poland, quelling speculation that they could be pulled out.
We'll put more there if they want.
With American soldiers on Polish soil, we solidify and we are secure.
Meanwhile, President Trump taking issue with China's military parade over a lack of credit to the U.S.
I was very surprised. I watched the speech last night. I don't believe that America, that the United States was acknowledged for helping China to gain its freedom.
The parade at Tiananmen Square aims to recast the Chinese Communist Party's role in World War II. President Trump, in a Tuesday post on Truth Social, accuses China of, quote, conspiring against the U.S. along with Russia and North Korea, whose leaders are in attendance. And walking shoulder to shoulder at the ceremonies in Beijing, Xi and Putin were caught on hot mic talking about organ transplants and immortality. A growing body of evidence indicates that the Chinese regime has been harvesting the healthy organs of prisoners of conscience and using them to supply a lucrative and opaque transplant industry. The London-based China Tribunal concluded after a year-long investigation that practitioners of Falun Gong, a mind-body spiritual practice persecuted in China, were the primary victim group, with Uyghurs and House Christians also at risk. In May, the House overwhelmingly passed the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act, aimed at punishing perpetrators of state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting in China.
An absolutely ugly truth being committed right now as we meet by Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. They are murdering tens of thousands of young people, Uyghurs, Falun Gong practitioners, and some others, in order to steal their organs.
And on the parade, President Trump says that he wouldn't have attended even if he were invited, as it wouldn't have been his place. Reporting from the White House, Mario Tsu, NTD News.
Ukraine is asking for more assistance from the U.S. in the form of weapons and pressure on Russia. This as France says European allies have successfully finalized a plan for security guarantees for Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has more.
By United States pressure, he can put Putin to the political negotiations.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says pressure by President Trump can bring Russia to the negotiation table. Western allies, including the US, continue working on a meeting between the presidents of Russia and Ukraine. Zelenskyy says he asked Trump to ramp up the efforts.
Sanctions, tariffs, any pressure, what you can on Russia. Otherwise, he will never stop this war.
On Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he'd agreed to a meeting, but only in his home turf.
If Zelenskyy is ready, let him come to Moscow, and such a meeting will take place.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine on Wednesday, at least 9 civilians are reported dead after Russian shelling and drone strikes. Officials say 3 women and 5 men were killed in the attack, which lasted for over an hour. Zelenskyy is now seeking more weapons from the US, especially as winter will start in a few months.
We need to provide additional Patriot systems for Ukraine. This is critical, especially before winter. Russia keeps hitting our energy sector.
Zelenskyy was first in Denmark and then in France on Wednesday. This just one day before a group of Western nations called the Coalition of the Willing is set to meet in Paris. One of the main topics they're set to discuss is security guarantees for Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron now says the plans for guarantees are finalized and are ready to be presented to the coalition.
The preparatory work is complete. It will now be endorsed politically, and we will come back to you tomorrow.
Macron is set to lead Thursday's meeting of the coalition along the Prime Minister of the UK. In total, 30 nations are part of the group and are set to be in Paris on Thursday. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Senate lawmakers say that maintaining the lead over China in space is not just a race, but a matter of U.S. national security. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
We are in a new space race with China. And if we fail, there will be a bad moon on the rise.
It's critical to our future economic and national security.
During a Senate hearing examining the race in space, the main theme was that the U.S. must maintain leadership over China.
If they get there first, we will see a global realignment that will impact our economy, our tax base, our ability to innovate, and our national security in terms of diplomacy and geopolitics that will affect security and many other aspects of our daily lives.
It is clear to me that the Chinese Communist Party is already employing its own integrated grand strategy for the Earth-Moon system, with only superficial distinction between civil, commercial, and national security activities, and all focused on a common purpose.
Senator Tim Sheehy questions whether NASA needs to make adjustments in order to stay ahead of the game.
And I'm very concerned that the bureaucracy of NASA, of which I love NASA, I'm a supporter, but we have to be honest with ourselves. Is the bureaucracy of NASA positioned to give us space dominance in the 21st century?
And on Tuesday, President Donald Trump emphasized the importance of keeping ahead of China and Russia in space while talking about the formation of Space Force from the Oval Office.
We were losing the race in space very badly to China and to Russia.
Senator Bernie Moreno brought up using America's private sector in order to compete with the Chinese regime.
And I think the advantage we have is that we have this strong, thriving private sector. How do we really integrate that to accomplish the mission that we all want?
I think that's a great point and a great question. I think we've got to, as an agency, NASA needs to build infrastructure that the private sector can see how they plug in and benefit from it. And then you get these naturally forming public-private partnerships.
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Busy day on Capitol Hill as lawmakers have their first full day of work since the August recess. House leadership could be facing 2 discharge petitions as government funding negotiations are underway. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Adoro Martinez, has the details.
Congressman Thomas Massie and Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna began collecting signatures on their discharge petition that would force a vote on a bill that, if passed, would force the Department of Justice to release all files relevant to Jeffrey Epstein. Victims of sex offender Jeffrey Epstein spoke on the steps of Capitol Hill in favor of the discharge petition.
This is a crime that, by our Justice Department's own admission, has 1,000 victims. 1,000 victims. Do you know 1,000 people? Think of the enormity of that. Could you be okay with a crime happening in your community to 1,000 girls and young women and not holding the perpetrators accountable.
House Republican leadership is conducting an investigation through the House Oversight Committee, which released some 33,000 pages of the Epstein file this week.
The objective here is not just to uncover, investigate the Epstein evils, but also to ensure that this never happens again, and ultimately to find out why justice has been delayed for these ladies for so very long.
A bipartisan group of lawmakers has given House leadership until the end of September to vote on a bill that would ban members of Congress from trading in stocks.
It is time for Congress to act. It is time for the leadership of Congress on both sides of the aisle to do what the American people have been demanding, which is to end day trading by members of Congress. They do not send us here to enrich ourselves while we are voting on the issues. They send us here to fix and address, and then have members who are trading stocks on the very issues they're supposed to be voting on.
The clock is also ticking on government funding. Democrats have threatened with a government shutdown unless Republicans, who control the House and the Senate, reach a bipartisan agreement with Democrats.
We had an opening conversation last week about the importance of trying to find common ground where possible in order to meet the needs of the American people. But in that conversation, I also made clear we're not going to support partisan funding legislation, period, full stop.
The Senate has already reached a bipartisan agreement on 3 out of the 12 appropriation bills, and the House has passed 2, but on a partisan line. Congress will likely opt for a continuing resolution to avoid a government shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
In the Middle East, thousands of reservists are reporting for duty as Israel plans to battle Hamas in one of its final strongholds. Meanwhile, a recorded phone call reveals that Hamas terrorists are not allowing civilians to evacuate combat zones in the Gaza Strip. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
In footage released on Wednesday, Israeli reservists who reported to duty were issued military equipment. Israeli forces say they're preparing to increase operational readiness ahead of Operation Gideon's Chariots 2. Israel's chief of the general staff met with some of the reservists who have reported for duty.
Hamas will have no place to hide from us. Wherever we locate them, whether they are senior or junior figures, we strike them all. We are going to increase and enhance the strikes of our operation, and that is why we called you. Thank you, and good luck to everyone.
However, not all reservists are reporting for duty, saying that Israel's increased operations in the Gaza Strip puts the hostages' lives at risk.
Any act of legitimizing continuing hostilities over a hostage deal is inherently a betrayal of the hostages and a betrayal to the Israeli people.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces continue with plans to battle the Hamas terrorist group in one of its final strongholds, Gaza City. Some residents in the city said they're afraid of leaving the area.
I live in a tent, so imagine when I find a tank above my head while I'm living in a tent, what is my situation?
But could residents have other reasons for not wanting to leave? One Gaza resident on a recorded phone call said some people are afraid to leave because Hamas terrorists are stopping people from evacuating.
We want to leave, but they're waiting for us on the way. Yes, Hamas members, they tell us there is no evacuation. Go back home. Go back.
And he said some people are using side roads instead of the main roads to evacuate. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Hamas shoots residents when they try to move to safe zones. Hamas has received widespread accusations of using civilians as human shields in the war in the Gaza Strip. And in another development, amidst calls for a Palestinian state, an Israeli minister said that a map is being drawn up on what land in the West Bank Israel will claim as its own.
Enemies should be fought against, not allowed a comfortable life. That is why the chief principle for applying sovereignty, get it well into your heads. This is the slogan: maximum territory, minimum population.
An official from the United Arab Emirates said Israeli annexation of the West Bank would be a, quote, red line for the UAE, which established formal ties with Israel in the Abraham Accords. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Coming up, the nationwide redistricting fight continues. Missouri lawmakers kick off a special session today, and 2 other states could follow suit. Arlene Richards has the latest. And another set of wildfires is burning in Central California. One is in a historic gold rush town where crews are working to protect century-old landmarks. Christina Corona reports from the West Coast when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A federal judge on Wednesday ruled the Trump administration unlawfully terminated about $2.2 billion in grants to Harvard University, restoring research funding to the school. Boston federal judge Allison Burroughs said the administration can no longer cut off the funding. The ruling comes as Harvard is seeking to make a deal that could bring an end to its multiple conflicts with the White House. President Trump has accused the university of supporting anti-Semitic and, quote, radical left ideologies. 3 other Ivy League schools have made agreements with the administration, including Columbia University, which in July agreed to pay $220 million to restore federal research money. Missouri lawmakers began a special session today to redraw the state's map of U.S. House congressional districts. It's the latest state to join the nationwide redistricting battle in the race for the most House seats. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Missouri State Legislature held a special session on Wednesday to draw a new congressional map. This move has officially inserted the state into the nationwide redistricting battle. The delegation is currently split between 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats and could see the state add an additional Republican majority district to its 8-member congressional delegation. Republican State Representative Dirk Deaton made a first read of Bill HB 1, which creates provisions for the redistricting changes. Called the Missouri First Map, the revised version would keep all current members of Missouri's congressional delegation in the current districts, but split fewer counties and municipalities, while preserving 2 of the current districts. Missouri follows California as the 3rd state to pursue a mid-decade redistricting. California's legislature has approved the redrawing effort, but the state's law requires a vote from the people. Texas was the first to take up the effort, expected to result in Republicans picking up 5 more congressional seats. The Missouri House will reconvene on Thursday at 10 a.m. Meanwhile, a 4th state, Ohio, is preparing for its congressional redistricting process. Residents can begin submitting their own redistricting plans to state lawmakers through a new state website. Under Ohio's constitution, the state map-making process doesn't follow the census, which occurs every 10 years. Ohio's voter-approved redistricting rules mandate that the state redraw its maps in the middle of the decade if its initial map passed without the necessary bipartisan support. Ohio lawmakers have until September 30th to draw a bipartisan-supported map. In Utah, a judge on Tuesday ordered state lawmakers to redraw their congressional map, pointing to Texas and California. The judge rejected their argument that a 1-month deadline to adopt a new map that complies with voter-approved standards is too short. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Firefighters are battling several wildfires in Central California that ignited during a lightning storm. One of the biggest is tearing through the historic town of Chinese Camp, which is nearly 180 years old. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
A lightning storm sparked a fast-moving wildfire in Central California Tuesday. The 6.5 fire has scorched more than 6,800 acres in Tuolumne County with 0% containment as of Wednesday. The fire grew rapidly within the first hours, forcing evacuations in the historic town of Chinese Camp and surrounding areas. Crews say the flames are moving at a dangerous pace, making it difficult to slow the spread. Several structures have been damaged or destroyed, including at least 5 homes. Chinese Camp is listed as a California historical landmark. During the gold rush, Chinese miners settled in the town in 1849 after being forced from another camp. They endured discrimination, including the costly foreign miners' tax, and the settlement became known as Chinese Camp. The fire has also destroyed the town's historic historic post office, which was originally built in 1854. Lightning storms sparked more than a dozen wildfires in the area. Cal Fire has grouped 9 of them, including the 6.5 fire, into what is called the September Lightning Complex. More than 400 firefighters are assigned to that complex, working around the clock to protect homes and historic sites. Dry weather with temperatures in the 90s is expected to continue through Thursday, making the fight even more difficult for fire crews. Officials have not reported any deaths or injuries so far. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Florida could become the first state to end all childhood vaccine mandates. The governor says it's about medical freedom. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Florida plans to remove childhood vaccine mandates in the state.
The Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them.
Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo said some mandates can be pulled by the state health department, but others would require state lawmakers to get involved. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis explained it's about medical freedom.
I think most people have really gotten interested in this in the advent of how the medical establishment acted during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you had a situation where so many of these entrenched elites were turning towards coercive measures, trying to dictate your behavior through various non-pharmaceutical interventions, mandates.
On the Florida Health Department's website, it says the state requires immunization for children attending daycare and public schools. This includes vaccines against measles, chickenpox, hepatitis B, and DTaP. But Ladapo said people have a right to make their own informed decisions.
Who am I as a government or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now to tell you what you should put in your body? Who am I to tell you what your child should put in your body? I don't have that right. Your body is a gift from God.
A Democratic state representative wrote on social media that scrapping vaccines is, quote, reckless and dangerous and could lead to outbreaks of preventable diseases. And on the West Coast on Wednesday, the Democratic governors of Washington, Oregon, and California announced that they would launch a health alliance, saying they will use shared principles to strengthen confidence in vaccines and coordinate guidelines for vaccine recommendations, regardless of actions by the federal government. David Lamb, NTD News.
As Florida moves to end all state vaccine mandates, will this protect individual choice or compromise at-risk children? Tune into Capitol Report with Steve Lance tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern as our panel discusses where we should draw the line between medical freedom and public health guidance. Coming up, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping caught on a hot mic discussing organ transplants to extend life. How those comments highlight a brutal atrocity that's taken place in China over the past 20 years. Jack Bradley reports. A 2019 report found that the Chinese regime forcibly harvests the organs of its detainees, including prisoners of conscience, primarily Falun Gong practitioners. Dr. Jessica Russo from Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting and Epoch Times senior editor Jan Jekielek join us to share their insights on the issue when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A hot mic picks up China's and Russia's leaders discussing organ transplants today. That's as the Chinese Communist regime has been conducting forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping caught on a hot mic discussing living to 150 years old through continuous organ transplants. It was caught while they were walking together during a military parade in Beijing on Wednesday. The moment comes as the Chinese Communist Party has been conducting widespread forced organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience. NTD's congressional correspondent Melina Wisecup asked House Speaker Mike Johnson about this incident, to which Johnson replied,
"We've heard some horrific stories of these organ transplants and all of this in China, that they take it from unwilling donors, okay, to put it mildly. And the fact that they were caught on a hot mic, first I've heard of that, is very telling. It tells you what their worldview is in contrast to ours. Speaking of evil."
A 2023 obituary of a former Chinese communist official, Gao Zhangqiang, says that he had replaced many organs in his body, and Gao himself said that many parts of his body are not his own anymore. The source of the organs remains a question. Human rights groups have found that the Chinese regime has been forcefully harvesting organs from prisoners of conscience for years, with no sign of stopping. A 2019 tribunal found that the CCP was primarily targeting the faith group Falun Gong. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a popular spiritual practice with meditative exercises and is based on the principles of truth, compassion, and tolerance. The CCP has been targeting them since July 1999. A couple bills in Congress are seeking to address this. That Falun Gong Protection Act, passed unanimously in the House back in May, it was introduced in the Senate by Senator Ted Cruz, but is still awaiting a vote. Last week, 10 state lawmakers sent letters to Senator Cruz expressing their support for the bill and urging him to push it through the Senate. One of the letters from State Representative Tom Oliverson reads, "The persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in China represents one of the most severe violations of human rights in modern times. For over 2 decades, people of faith have endured arbitrary detention, torture, and even forced organ harvesting simply because of their spiritual beliefs."
And they're subject to horrific practices, including organ harvesting. They literally capture practitioners of Falun Gong. They remove their organs and then they provide them either to transplant to other Chinese nationals, or they also find them the organs on the black market.
While we await action on the federal level, many states have already passed their own laws targeting this practice. Texas, Utah, Idaho, and Tennessee have passed laws barring insurance companies from covering transplant tourism in China. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
How are everyday Americans reading the hot mic moment between Putin and Xi? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
During the military parade in China, there was a hot mic moment caught between Putin's translator and Xi Jinping. I'm going to read that statement to you. So he's saying, "Human organs can be continuously transplanted. The longer you live, the younger you become, and you can even achieve immortality." And the significance of that statement is that China has been accused of, harvesting organs from prisoners of conscience and selling them, running a state-run operation, basically, targeting certain groups of people. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm not aware of that exact report, but I think everyone knows that something like that's going on. I mean, that's what happens in the totalitarian sort of government that has ultimate control over people's bodies with a Judeo-Christian background. I think that's, abhorrent.
I'm not familiar with it, but it doesn't sound very good.
No.
That doesn't sound like anything we should be doing, or they should be doing.
I don't know why you would want to harvest organs from somebody who did not give permission ever. I mean, that's not humane.
For them, it's a business, and it's a way to keep going, and they can care less because they don't care about human rights. Look at the Uyghurs in China. Look at others in China. It's hard to get whistleblowers in China. Because their organs will be gone too.
Right now in the U.S., we've seen a lot of legislation on both the federal and state level aimed at tackling this issue. So we're talking like freezing assets of those who were involved in forced organ harvesting. What are your thoughts on that? Would you support that?
I would definitely support that, yeah. Just from a human rights perspective, you shouldn't, do that to people.
They can identify people that have ties to our organ harvesting. Of course, we should sanction them.
If you're a part of that without permission, then there should be action taken against you. You cannot play God and just harvest anybody's organs just because, or you've got to have their permission, and that's a right. I mean, it's just wrong any other way.
If you're a company who are doing that, if you're an individual who are doing that, you should be sanctioned. You should go to jail. Even if you're an American, you go to China and you get in some organs from somebody else and you don't even know or you don't care, you're breaking our laws as well.
And joining us now to share their insights on the situation, we have Dr. Jessica Russo. She's a mental health advisor and board member for Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting. We also have Jan Jekielek. He's a senior editor at the Epoch Times and the host of American Thought Leaders. Jan has been covering the forced organ harvesting issue over the last 20 years. He's also the author of the forthcoming book, Killed to Order, China's Organ Harvesting Industry and the True Nature of America's Biggest Adversary. Thank you both so much for joining us. Dr. Russo, first, what was your reaction to this hot mic moment, and where do you think these organs are coming from?
I think it was really stunning, and I think it was actually an inadvertent admission of what we have known to be happening since 2006. It is very clear that the Chinese government is harvesting organs from unwilling donors. And there was something back in 2019, this was about a 1-minute clip from a military hospital in China that made it very clear that top Chinese officials are getting multiple organs to prolong their lives. So we're hearing this again. And it was actually during the COVID pandemic where we heard something about someone in the top echelons of the CCP who had died and had multiple organs. So we know what's happening in China. The donation rate is extremely low. We know these are coming from unwilling people, their own citizens.
And Jan, your reaction to the hot mic moment?
I mean, it's kind of shocking that somehow this got hot mic'd. But, you know, we've known for basically since 2006 that this horrific practice of taking organs, you know, involuntarily from prisoners of conscience is happening. And, you know, the thing that just struck me so hard is it's really just been the cost of inaction that has, you know, allowed this to basically keep going. There's ways to kind of slow it down at least, if not stop it. But this is, I mean, it even hit me hard, and I've been covering this, as you said, for 20 years. It's unreal.
And Jan, staying with you quickly, the London-based China Tribunal concluded in 2019 that Falun Gong practitioners were the primary victim group of forced organ harvesting in China. Now, this ties directly to the transplant industry that Xi has perhaps unwittingly put under the spotlight. Could you walk us through more of the China Tribunal's findings?
Well, the China Tribunal was extremely important. It was actually a comprehensive review of all the evidence that had already been found, and also finding, you know, basically the experts that were out there and even some whistleblowers who hadn't come forth before to basically put together the comprehensive picture of what happened. It was, you know, run by Sir Jeffrey Nice. It was something that he prosecuted Slobodan Milosevic back in the day. And it was done, wasn't done under legal authority, but it was done as if it were done under legal authority with kind of the highest bar for evidence. And just, you know, a few of the things they found, I mean, the sort of the best estimates for the number of organs being transplanted, something 60 to 100,000 a year. You know, and really with no real credible organ donation sources. I mean, as of 2015, there's supposedly some kind of real organ donation system that's happening, but work has actually shown by researchers that these numbers are kind of a perfect quadratic equation. So basically, they invented the numbers. So that's a huge amount. Add that up. You know, we've got incredibly short wait times. I mean, people were going to China within 2 weeks and scheduling a heart transplant. So you know when someone's going to be dead. And this is not one instance. This is many instances. You know, there's also this kind of massive infrastructure development that happened immediately after '99. So this is why that's relevant. The persecution of Falun Gong practitioners was initiated by the Chinese Communist Party in 1999. And there was already this killing of prisoners for organs happening. But what happens right at the time when the Falun Gong persecution begins, when the CCP starts that, is this massive, massive growth. To kind of illustrate it, I pulled a number here. You know, I think in 1999, there were 22 liver transplant centers that existed in the country. By 2006, it was something like 500. So, you know, just massive, massive growth, again, with no real credible organ donation source. And they would tell people that it's actually executed prisoners that are getting
people are getting killed for these organs, they would admit that. What they wouldn't admit is that it's actually completely innocent people, prisoners of conscience, that were put into the system, the labor camps and the jails, by the hundreds of thousands. Ultimately millions pass through that system, and a very, very vulnerable population, because they're not implicating their family members, they're not implicating their fellow practitioners, they're being tortured by the regime anyway, so people just disappear, and no one imagined that something as horrible as this could actually be happening to them.
And Dr. Russo, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting were the ones who actually coined the term forced organ harvesting. Talk to us about this horrific practice and what it entails.
Well, a lot of people think that this is black market organ trade that happens throughout the world, including in the US. But what is happening in China is very unique. The Chinese government is the only one in the world that's harvesting organs forcibly from donors, living donors. These are primarily Falun Gong practitioners. This goes back to 2006, all the evidence we have here. As Jan suggested, shortly right after the persecution of Falun Gong started in 1999, we see this boom in the transplant industry. We know that the donation rate in China is very, very low. It's about 0.03%, which is only about 300,000 people, just over that. The government had suggested in 2014 that by 2015, they would stop using criminal prisoners. They never acknowledged using prisoners of conscience. But this never happened. What we heard at some point during 2015 was that criminal prisoners would be in the donation list. Because, of course, they have a right to donate if they want. That was the idea. So the Chinese government has not made any kind of effort to stop what they're doing. And they're certainly not admitting that these are prisoners of conscience, primarily Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, Tibetans, House Christians. And like Jan suggested, the China Tribunal, and even before that, in 2016, there was a massive research project into what's going on in China in organ transplantation. And the numbers showed it was between 60 to 100,000 transplants they were doing per year. And with such a low donation rate, it can only be these prisoners of conscience, especially when the infrastructure has expanded so intensely right after the persecution. That's not a coincidence.
And Dr. Russo, House Speaker Mike Johnson telling NTD in response to the hot mic moment, quote, "It tells you where their worldview is in contrast to ours," adding, "If the leaders are talking about it, it should alarm us." What can we draw from these comments about the CCP's worldview?
They don't care about people. They have no ethics. The idea that we are working with them, that we have been trading with them since 2021, it's really unconscionable. It's so hard to believe that we would be working with such an inhumane government. I wouldn't even call them a government. This is a regime that's anti-human. So we really have to be careful. One of the things that really puts us in such a precarious position in the United States, as well as in many other Western countries, we are training Chinese physicians who will likely go back and commit these murders. And we have pharmaceutical companies in the West, primarily in the US actually, that are providing materials for China's transplants. And we have medical supply companies also providing materials and products for China's transplants. So we don't want to be complicit in this. There's a bill now that's in the Senate. It passed earlier this year in the House called the Falun Gong Protection Act. It's the first bill to address forced organ harvesting of the primary group, Falun Gong practitioners. And it not only will serve to save lives, but it will also help to protect US interests. And this also includes patients who are going to be lured by China's short wait times. And you can get an appointment to get an organ within 2 weeks. That's unheard of here. You can get a heart, you can get cornea, whatever you want, as long as you can pay the money for it. So we do not want to be complicit in this crime.
And Jan, what does this hot mic moment tell us about the CCP's worldview?
Something really important, it actually makes me think of, and this is just, there's a scholar at Stanford named Chenggang Xu whose contention is that the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, basically fooled America and the world into believing that they were simply an authoritarian regime, not an actual totalitarian regime, which they are in fact. Okay, which means that the Chinese Communist Party is supreme. The life of the Chinese Communist Party is supreme to all other goals in the society, basically, right? And so what he figured out was that the way that the Chinese Communist Party actually has stayed in power, say in comparison to the Soviet Communist Party and others which have collapsed, is by creating a situation where they would put strategic direction down into the regions, and in the regions would actually start competing with each other, like for example the different states, about implementing their directives. So in order to achieve something like this organ harvesting, I was trying to figure out how is it that they could have grown so quickly, instantly, when the Falun Gong persecution began, right? But we have this situation where, one, they were targeted for eradication. I use that term. That was, I believe, Jiang Zemin's words. There was this goal to increase the transplant industry. And all it really took, and basically these people were dehumanized in the most horrible ways through massive state propaganda. I'm talking about the Falun Gong here. And so all it really took was one very evil person in one of the states, I even have a theory about who that is, I won't say it right now, to basically say, hey, wait a second, we can actually, get rid of these people, and we can actually monetize this, and we can grow our industry. I mean, it's win-win for everybody. That's think about the evil of that mentality, right? And at that moment, when that system or that region became successful, everybody else looked and said, my God, we have to play ball. We have to get on board with what's happening here, because he's fulfilling the Communist Party's objectives so well, right? And so we had this massive boom. I think that's what happened. But I think this really illustrates this really weird and twisted mentality that we just kind of missed. In an authoritarian regime, there are actually independent structures, and like Taiwan, right? They can actually shift away from being totalitarian, from following the communist way. But in the communist society, everything ultimately is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, despite there being this kind of market in implementing party directives that was created.
Well, Dr. Jessica Russo, Yanya Kellick, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up in the NFL, is the league considering having a Taylor Swift halftime show at the Super Bowl? Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in tennis at the U.S. Open, where we had a big match last night in the men's draw. Where do things stand now?
Well, let me tell you, Tiff. Yeah, last night, 7th-ranked Novak Djokovic took down the American 4th-ranked Taylor Fritz in 4 sets. And the American crowd was, of course, rooting for Fritz. But Djokovic almost seemed to feed off that hostile energy, definitely engaging with the crowd there. Really seemed to get him pumped up there. So with the win now, he is 11-0 in his career against Fritz. And he also moves into the semifinals of the U.S. Open, where he will face 2nd-ranked Carlos Alcaraz, who won in straight sets yesterday. Now, Djokovic 5-3 in his career against Alcaraz. He won their last matchup that was at the Australian Open earlier in January. Now in the other quarterfinal action today, 27th-ranked Felix Auger-Aliassime upset 8th-ranked Alex de Minaur in 4 sets to advance. Now tonight, then, #1-ranked Jannik Sinner will face 10th-ranked Lorenzo Musetti. The winner will face the aforementioned Felix Auger-Aliassime in the other semifinal action. So I really worked hard on these pronunciations, Tiff. I hope you appreciate that. I'm not sure if I got them correct, but it's a lot closer than the spelling looks like. I can tell you that anyway.
I'll have to have people comment in the comments. Looking at the women's side of the draw, though, one of the semifinals matchups is already set, and it's a rematch of last year's final.
Yeah, number 1 ranked Aryna Sabalenka will face 4th ranked Jessica Pegula. Now, Sabalenka beat Pegula in the finals last year of the U.S. Open. She owns a 7-2 career record against her. Now, last night, Sabalenka won in what's called a walkover as her opponent, Marketa Vondrousova, had to withdraw before the match even started with an injury. Now, it's the latest a walkover has happened at the U.S. Open since Chris Evert back in 1988 was not able to go against Steffi Graf in the semifinals. Last night's match was in the quarterfinals. Now, the other semifinal is being decided today. We already have one member in. American Amanda Anisimova beat Iga Swiatek this afternoon in straight sets. Now, this was a rematch of the Wimbledon finals just a couple months ago where Swiatek beat her 6-love, 6-love. So Anisimova, though, avenges that. And then tonight, it's going to be 13th ranked Karolina Mukova against 24th ranked Naomi Osaka. The winner will get to face Anisimova in the other semifinal action. You got all that?
Well, we're going to move away from tennis, shift gears to the NFL, because Commissioner Roger Goodell was non-committal when asked today whether Taylor Swift would be performing the Super Bowl halftime show later this season.
Yes, Goodell was on NBC's Today Show today. They pressed him several times about this. Now, first he said, we would love to have Taylor play. She's special, special talent. Obviously, she would be welcome at any time. So then he's pressed again, and he says, I can't tell you a thing about it. So they go for a third time. They said, is it a maybe? And Goodell said, it's a maybe. So obviously, Swift in the NFL becomes somewhat synonymous with her engaged now to Chiefs All-Pro tight end Travis Kelce and, being visible at a number of his games, including the last 2 Super Bowls. She's also announced her latest album, The Life of a Showgirl, will be released on October 3rd. Now, last year, rapper Kendrick Lamar performed the halftime show, got 133.5 million viewers as the most watched in NFL history. So maybe if Swift comes on, we'll get 140 million. I got to say, I don't think I can even remember the last time I watched a halftime show. Usually that's the part where I mute it and get something to eat, or so where, we're doing something else. It's kind of playing in there in the background, but maybe if Swift is on, maybe so. Maybe I'd watch it.
So you're the opposite of, most of the country.
Yeah.
Looking at baseball news, though, Shohei Ohtani hit his 100th home run yesterday as a member of the Dodgers in just his 294th game. Where does that rank him in terms of quickest to reach that milestone with a new team?
Yeah, 3rd fastest ever in terms of games played anyway. Now, he hasn't even completed his 2nd season with the Dodgers. The fastest, Mark McGwire, back in the mid-90s with the Cardinals. Took him just 230 games to hit 100 home runs. Now, that includes his record-breaking season of 1998 when he hit 70. And the 2nd fastest, none other than Babe Ruth, who took 250 games to hit his first home runs with the Yankees, a century ago. Now, so Ohtani's home run yesterday gives him 46 on the season. Is good for 3rd right now in the big leagues. He's behind Cal Raleigh of the Mariners, who has 51, and Kyle Schwarber of the Phillies, who has 49. Now, all 3 are in action tonight. Ohtani's Dodgers play at the Pirates. Meanwhile, Schwarber's Phillies are at the Brewers. And finally, Cal Raleigh's Mariners are at the Rays. Now, just an FYI, Cal Raleigh's nickname is, I just found out, is the Big Dumper. Though I'm not sure how he got that nickname. I'm almost afraid to ask, but he is known as the Big Dumper, and the guy is quite a home run hitter.
All right, well, there's your fact for the day. Davis, always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.